happy to see you brave the wet weather and all of that traffic out there to come over here and participate in this discussion tonight, which is the first of a series of 3 that we're going to focus on this whole movement of tiny houses. Before we get into that, thanks again for coming. And thank you for those of you that have joined the Guild and are members, and especially to those that are kind of trying us out. And we appreciate your donations at the door. And that's what really keeps us going. It is this kind of participation, whether you're contributing your time or a little bit of money, or filling in wherever we can. We are probably one of the most sustainable groups and have been here about 25 years now.
Exactly, 25 years.
There you go. Were you here at 25 years?
I was.
Very good. Kate O'Donnell. Kate, can you stand?
Sure.
So Kate is in charge of our membership these days. And Kate, do you have something to tell us about membership?
I do. That was a lovely segue. Thank you, Pat. Hi, everybody. How are you doing tonight? Yeah. Good, good. My name is Kate O'Donnell, and 25 years ago, I was one of the founding board members of the Northwest Ecobuilding Guild. So I know that it was exactly 25 years ago. And I've been involved with this organization ever since. For those who've been involved with the Guild, you might know that I produced the green pages for the Guild for a really long time. Since 1996 was my first green pages that I've ever done. So I was very happy to come on again and support the Guild in their Legacy Membership Project. So what the Legacy Membership Project is actually a win-win for everybody. Oh, hi, Kinley. And so what we're doing is we have a new executive director, Chris Van Dalen. You want to wave at everybody, Chris? Chris, just wave. That's all you have to do. There you go. We have a new executive director, Chris Van Dalen, who's going to take us on the pathway to our next 25 years. And so what we want to do is raise some additional funds so that we can give him the leverage, some more leverage to leverage our resources so that we can do what we do well, even better. The Northwest Ecobuilding Guild is renowned for these events right here. They've been at the Finney Neighborhood Center for a really long time. Our monthly meetings where we meet almost every month except for November and December. And I think in August we have the potluck. But otherwise we have our monthly meetings here, and it's one of the, I think, the most exciting and innovative ways to get information out to regular folks such as yourselves. So thank you all for coming for that. One of the other things that the Guild is renowned for is the Green Home Tour. So for those of you who don't know, the Green Home Tour is coming up in April, and new this year, it's going to be back down in Olympia and in Tacoma. You can look on our website to find out the dates for that. Then the other thing is our Green Building Slam and Northwest Ecobuilding Guild Summit that we have in November. Generally for the last several years, it's been at Kane Hall at UW. So those are our signature events, and that's the work that we want to continue to do. And so we're asking our members to help us out. And like I said, the win-win part is the Legacy Membership Program allows members, whether you've been with us for 25 years or tonight's your first night, like Nancy Peacock. Where's Nancy? Nancy just signed up as a Legacy member this evening. Yes, thank you, Nancy. And so the deal is I can't remember exactly, but I think it's been 25 years since we've raised our membership rates. And so what we wanted to do was give our members who've been supporting us for a really long time an opportunity to continue to support us And that's obviously the win for the guild, but the win for you guys is that we're offering that membership at our old rate. So as long as you renew for 2 to 3 years, that gives us the extra funds that we need to support Chris in his new endeavors and to support our ongoing programs. And it gives you a tremendous savings. So all you have to do is sometime tonight, come up to me, tell me that's what you want to do, and I'll take care of the rest. All right, so I hope you'll consider joining many of us. How many of our legacy members are here? I know Tom's here, we got a couple. So thank you all for your support, and if you'd like to join us, just come and see me. All right, thanks you guys.
Kate is one of the reasons why I'm here, because you always have a lot of fun with her. Okay, so thanks, Kate. How many of you have actually seen the box truck yet? Oh, great. You braved it in the rain. Yeah, there's a great story coming up on that. I want to give a shout out to all the volunteers that helped pull this together. I was jotting down all the functions that are required, and there's got to be about 50 different functions to put on an event like this, and everybody is contributing just a little bit. So one of the things we have to do is we have to set up the hall for ourselves, and we have to break it down. How many of you are available to break down the furniture before we leave tonight? Great, okay, we're counting on you. The other thing is that we're trying to get more participation in our activities. A lot of you have talent that is hidden and we don't know about it. We want to know about that. So get involved with us. There's a volunteer sheet that we have over there on the table. Sign up to volunteer, and then when we have an event, I'll send out an email to all of you to see how many of you can come in and do a few minutes of work or even an hour of work that can help us keep all the pieces together. The other thing I wanted to mention, Wendy, do you want to talk about the hub? Wendy's our newest member, and she comes with a lot of talent. She would never say anything about that, but she is getting involved with us, and I wanted her people to know who she is. Go ahead, Wendy.
Okay, so when you were talking about the Green Home Tour, I wanted to bring up the fact that we are going to have a tiny home hub during the Green Home Tour. Yay! Yay! And that'll be held at Green Home Solutions. So we are actively still getting a few more green or tiny homes. So if any of you know or want to bring your tiny homes to those spots, or that spot, that would be great. And I think that's about it.
Okay, great.
All right, great. Green Home Solutions, 1210 West Henderson Street.
Yes, and there may actually be another hub if we get more tiny homes to participate. So right now there's 2 committed at Green Home Solutions, and we'll talk about that, at least one of them during this session. Okay, coming up is, let me look back. We had something very new this year. We started a workshop with Passive House Northwest. And one of the things that happens at these sessions is that we kind of give a broad brush of a topic, and we can't really dive deep into it. So on February 15th, a couple weeks ago, we joined Passive House Northwest, and we focused only on windows. And it was a deep dive of about 4 hours into all of the permutations of windows. As you know, the building envelope leaks slowly, and the biggest culprit in that building envelope are the windows. So that's why it's so important to understand windows. And we had a lot of participants from a do-it-yourself window maker on up to the highest quality of windows that we're actually manufacturing here in the United States. It's no longer coming from Austria and Germany anymore. We're actually got it here. And over the last couple of years, you can almost count on 2 hands the new providers that are coming in with this high quality windows. So we want to do more deep dives. We're currently planning a mechanical workshop that's coming up hopefully in May. And if any of you are interested in the mechanical side, that is the plumbing, the HVAC, solar, join the committee and get involved and help us do the research, and you'll have fun because we love this stuff. We're all a bunch of tree huggers and we just love to dive deep. So join the crowd, sign up as a volunteer, and put a little note if you're interested in a particular topic. If it's tiny houses, write in tiny houses. If it's tiny houses with any one of these speakers, put their name right next to your volunteer name, and we'll make sure they get to you, or we get you to them. Okay, coming up in after tonight's session, the March session is going to be a technical session. It's materials for a healthy home. So one of the things that we as green builders do is we dive into what makes it mean a healthy home. And I won't spill the beans on them, but they have a really great coordinator on that has studied this issue and currently is one of the leading people that does mold removal. Out in April, we're going to dive into tiny houses again, but it's going to be the legal aspect. And this is the biggest barrier for tiny houses and for that movement to happen. So we felt that it needed its own session because there's so many different things that not only need to be done, but some things are actually getting done. Out in April, we have the Green Home Tour, as was mentioned. Make sure you sign up for that. And let me give a shout out to Eric Goheen. Eric, are you here? So Eric, so I can come up? Yeah. Yes. So Eric was brave enough to volunteer and lead this topic tonight. Are you ready?
Yes, I have one more announcement.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Kinley Diller is from King County, and they're doing a social justice and housing workshop this week. I'm going to give him 1 minute to talk about that, just something that's happening, and then we'll get on with the session. Step right up, Kinley.
Thanks, Eric. So again, my name is Kinley Diller. I'm from King County Solid Waste, Department of Natural Resources and Parks, and the Green Tools team. And we're partnering with the Guild and with the Master Builders Association and Build Green to put on a equity and social justice training. Primarily, we've been working on trying to get in the leaders in the green building industry, the boards, the people that are doing a lot of the decision making of these organizations right now, getting them to the table to take part in this training. But we are opening it up to anybody else that's interested. I believe the last Ecobuilding Guild newsletter that went out has a link to where you can go to register. Yeah, there's more details there. So you can also talk to me. I'll be around at the break. Yeah, it's March 26th, thanks, from 12:30 to 3:30, and it's in Bellevue. We're kind of guarding the location a little bit. So once you register, you'll get the location. But it's in Bellevue. Yeah.
If I understand correctly, there's no cost.
Correct. Yep, it's free.
You have to reserve now.
Yep, limited space. Go on and reserve a slot. So, thank you.
Thanks, Kinley. Okay, let's get to it. Our first speaker tonight is an architect with the Block Project. He was here last year at our tiny house session. And he's just embarking on starting a program to rehouse the homeless by adopting them into the communities, putting a tiny home on each city block in the city of Seattle. He wants your participation to lend a piece of land to adopt one of the homeless in our community. And I'd like to introduce to you Rex Holbein.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I have a quick question. How did the slides get advanced? Just go. So I'm going to go really quickly here because I know we've moved to more speakers. So we were here last June. My daughter and I were both architects. About 8 years ago, I want to give you a little background before I talk about the block project, some context. And that is that about 8 years ago, after having run my own architectural practice for about 27 years doing high-end residential work, I started a Facebook page called Facing Homelessness. And that page was specifically just taking black and white photos of people that are homeless and telling their story with one intent, and that is to show their beauty. There was nothing more complicated than that, and it was a belief that if you show enough beauty, you say beauty, 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 you can overcome the negative, negative, negative that is part of the negative stereotype. And that quickly grew into what is now a community of about 50,000 people following it. And one of the stats that I'd like to share that we're really so excited isn't the right word, you know, is it creates belief in community and the power of community, and that is that for these last 7.5, 8 years that I've been making these posts for people on the street, a lot of times there are asks. Every single time I've made an ask has been met by this community. Every single time. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be thousands of dollars to get a car out of town. Within 2 hours, the PayPal account is filled. So I'm going to show you, to get things going, I want to just talk a little bit about homelessness and the importance of community to solving homelessness. The idea that if we don't get involved, we're kidding ourselves. If we really, truly, as compassionate people, which I believe everyone is, want to end homelessness, we all have to get involved. And anything less than that, we're basically just lying. And that's the honest truth. And I think the thing that's important for us to remember is that this is not a homelessness crisis. This is a community crisis. Healthy community does not accept homelessness, period. That's straightforward. None of us are comfortable with it, but we have to take the next step, and that is to do something about it. So this is Jen. She's lived in the Georgian motel on Aurora for the last 10 years. Has a chain link fence around it. The two people I want to just show you quickly to give you an idea of what's important in this effort, and that is the person. These are just two people I met this week. This goes on week after week after week, really for thousands of people that I've had this incredible pleasure to get to meet. Jen has lived in this motel for 10 years. All the other units right now are empty. The doors are all off. The wiring and the pictures have all been torn off the walls. It's about to be demoed, and she's got another day, actually tomorrow. She has to be out of this hotel. When I went in, I was frankly, I was blown away. It's just stuffed with furniture in her home. And she cleared a bunch of books off the shelf, off the little chair, and said, "Here, have a seat." And her and Cleo, if you show the next picture, her cat, it's kind of blurry right now, but was sitting on the bed, and she started talking, and I interrupted her after like 2 minutes, and I said, "I already know I like you so much." And she goes, "I like you too." And then I said, and then she said, "You know, that's been my whole life. People have told me I have an aura, right? And this is the important thing. She's going to be homeless. It's an important thing to remember that every single one of the 11,643 people that are homeless in King County, they're a beautiful human being." So the next slide. Yeah, it's definitely the focus, but you guys get the idea. This is Lorelei, and she lives on a platform in Freeway Park over I-5. Can't see if that's a station wagon thing she's ever passed. And I've seen her there on this platform driving on I-5 myself, and finally I went to look for her, and I got to an overpass and yelled down to her 20 feet, and I said, "Hey," and she looked up and she goes, "What?" And I said, "Can I come visit you?" And she yelled back, "No, it's private property." How does that work? But she goes, and I said, "Well, I want to chat with you." And she goes, "Here's my phone number. Let's go have coffee." So I'm going to go have coffee with her next week. This is the important thing is that if we're going to get involved, right, we have to figure out what's stopping us. And I want to just make one quick, maybe the next slide. I want to make one quick, oops, forgot to put one in there. Anyways, one quick observation that occurred to me, and that is when you are 100 yards away from any issue, let's just say it's and you see somebody that's homeless, you ask all these intellectual questions. How did that happen? Did this person make the right choices? Why are they there? And there are all these intellectual questioning, wanting us to understand what is going on. But as you're walking closer and closer, and you start to get close enough that you get into that personal space, the intellectual questions drop away and the emotional ones start coming forward. Like, are you okay? What can I do to be of service to you? Can I be your friend? Right? And this is, I'm going to do one more quick example, and then I'm going to talk about the block project. And that is that, so as an architect, I get to use the design process, right? And I'm sure a lot of people in this room understand the design process. And it starts with an intellectual capturing of all the information. It's creating the program for whatever it is you're going to design. And then you eventually have to move to out of the intellectual understanding into an emotional heart feeling about what this building wants to be, right? So it's the same process. We don't want to lose all the intellectual understanding we have about homelessness, but we can't stop there. That's not enough. We have to move close enough, constantly coming closer and closer so that we can emotionally understand what's going on. So it's a proximity issue, really, in our opinion, about ending homelessness. The closer you get, the more you feel, the more you feel, the more you act. That's all it is, Susan. So we have a Just Say Hello campaign, proximity. Just get closer, smile, say something beautiful. The block project is the other end of that project. Next slide. So as was said earlier, yep. How's that? Okay. So if you take this idea of proximity, coming closer to really understand the emotional issue of homelessness, Just Say Hello brings that to you, and putting the idea of putting a home in the backyard of a residential lot ultimately is the exact same thing. It's creating proximity. So our goal for the block project is to put one of these homes, which is 125 square feet, in the backyard of a residential lot under detached accessory dwelling unit zoning. Our goal is to put one on every single block in the city of Seattle. If we do that, we more than enough provide housing to end homelessness. Next slide. So real quickly, they're 125 square feet. They have a bathroom, kitchen, a sofa that pulls out to be a bed, a covered porch, storage, and as I mentioned, next slide, they are designed to be completely off-grid, meaning all of the power comes from solar panels, all of the water comes from water catchment purification, and all of the waste is taken care of on-site with a composting toilet and subsurface irrigation for the gray water. So next slide. So we're also, ILFI, the International Living Future Institute, has taken us on as a pro bono project. So they are helping us get all of these homes to be living building challenge. Who knows? I mean, this crowd knows, everybody knows what living building challenge is. Next slide. It's made up of these 7 petals. It has really a lot more to do than just about the building. It is about, you know, how we should be living on planet Earth. And one of the things that we believe strongly, both at Facing Homelessness, the nonprofit that grew out of the Facebook page I mentioned earlier, and the Block Project that Block Architects is doing, is that if we create a cycle of better taking care of each other, for instance, not just putting people in sheds, but actually putting them in a home that has all the same amenities that we do. And again, I'm not speaking negative against any solutions on homelessness. With as many people that are homeless right now in our county, in our city, we need every single solution, every single one. But ultimately, we need to hunt to a place where we're creating dignity, where people can live like we're all living, inside with kitchen and bath and sleeping. So if we provide that kind of dignity for living, and we also, at the very same time, we do something for the planet, we create a cycle where we take better care of each other. When we do that, we naturally, we believe, take better care of the planet, and when we take better care of the planet, we naturally start to take better care of each other, and that creates this beautiful cycle, and that we need both if we're going to actually, you know, create beautiful community. Next slide. So last time Jen and I were here, my daughter, we talked about this project, but we hadn't built one yet. So I want to introduce the 3 people that stepped forward for the first block home. This is Kim on the left, and Dan. They have a house on Beacon Hill, and this is Bobby in the middle. He's a 75-year-old First Nation Cree person. He's been homeless for 10 years on the streets of Seattle. And next slide. And here they are outside of Bobby's home in Kim and Dan's backyard, having the first meal was a meal outside with friends that came over. Next slide. And so, going real quickly, I'm glossing over last stuff, but how did this happen? And the simplest answer is community. A lot of people, I mean, I think 300 people used Dan and Kim's bathroom during this time. A lot of people came together to clear the site, to build it, to create all of the processes. All of the engineering for this project, from civil, structural, mechanical, landscape architecture, legal, everything really that had to do with this project, including labor, a lot of materials, was donated. It was all pro bono services. I want to give you a really quick, let's see the 5-minute card yet. I want to give a really quick rundown of how this actually happens. So every resident, including Bobby, has to come through case management. So right now, we're working with 4 case management agencies: Chief Salad Club, Sophia Way, Community Psychiatric Clinic, and I'm talking too fast. What's that? Mary's Place. Thank you. And so they have to come through case management, and the idea is that host families come forward, they fill out a big form, and the case manager looks through that form and makes a match. We have a UW team right now that's creating an app that's actually a match.com experience. But the idea is that we're not creating landlord-tenant relationships. We're creating friendships. And so when 2 people get hooked up, they would maybe go have a dinner together or a garden. I can tell you that for Kim, Dan, and Bobby, you know, Dan and Bobby both play music, and they really, really loved finding that out. Kim and Bobby both love to garden, and they all love cats. You know, there's these overly, and that sounds silly, but it's so important, right? So they get matched up, and when that happens, Kim and Dan go to the neighborhood, and both Kim, Dan, and Bobby, all 3 of them, understand that this can still fall apart. They just agreed that they would all love to live on the same property together. Okay, so Facing Homelessness gives Kim and Dan information, and they take it to all their neighbors, and they say, hey, here's what we're doing. It's all legal, of course, under zoning, but they invite them to be a part of it, to create community. This isn't about helping the person who's homeless. This is about creating community, and that Bobby's going to be a part of that. Then they have a party at their house, and they invite everybody to have conversation, and if they have any issues, to talk about them, any concerns. So, and all of that took place with Dan, Kim, and Bobby already on the first house. From that point, the construction starts. All of the house is built in panels off-site. It's brought to the house, brought to the site, and then erected in about 3 days. And then there's about 2 weeks following of all the materials and finishes. So next slide. Thanks. So we've had this tremendous community support. We have so far enough for 10 homes funded, already raised through the community. We like to say that this project is completely community funded, built, and supported. And to date, we have no grant money, no government money. But I will say that from Sally Bagshaw, Mike O'Brien, and the City Council, they've been extremely supportive, have opened lots of doors for us, introduced us to Nathan Torkelson, the head of DCI, to Patty Hayes, head of the Health Department, and have had countless meetings at this point to help push through what I'm sure all of you already understand or know, and that is that, you know, we can't just build a house in Seattle off-grid yet. We can do the solar panels, but the water and the sewer is still not allowed. If you are within 300 feet of a sewer hookup, you have to hook up, right? So we're in this process right now of creating a pilot program to allow for this to happen. And the reason this is important is that the city knows they have a problem with waste management right now. As the city gets denser and denser, they need other solutions than the infrastructure that is currently in place. So they want this to happen because it'll allow them to create data. What they need to approve something on this scale of being off-grid and taking care of waste on-site is data. So they are hoping to do that through the block project. You know, Jenny Durkin, Mayor Durkin came on her third day of being in office. Cal Constantine came. Now they're giving us a 60,000 square foot warehouse to build these homes in on Harbor Island. That's going to be announced on Friday by Dow. Oh yeah, we got a letter from Senator Patty Murray saying that she's super excited about the block project. So the government, whatever that's worth, the government is excited about this because it creates density. It finds land without having to go into communities and taking large chunks of land. And maybe most important, that I'll just laugh for half more second here, is that this is an integrated solution. And we can very hyper-focus on helping people that are homeless move out of homelessness, but what we're forgetting is to help ourselves grow with that transition. If we don't change and we don't open our own hearts and understand what people are going through, we can't move along. And so we'll always be looking at people that are outside as the other, and we won't think of them as as ourselves as part of the solution. Next slide. So here's Bobby and Kim, and I can tell you they're like best friends, hands down. Like Kim even told me a couple of weeks ago, it's even made our marriage better. You know, it's not on our website yet about block project makes the marriage better, but a lot of people have asked us, so that's great. Dan and Kim are exceptional human beings, but can this really scale? I mean, how many people are willing to open up their backyards? We've had examples of Airbnb, the idea of, before Airbnb, the idea of inviting a stranger into your home to sleep while somebody came, while you slept. It's crazy. That whole thought has completely morphed now. We think nothing of inviting people into our homes while we sleep. We feel the same thing's going to happen with our backyards, that we are going to allow ourselves to share our personal space so that we can do social good. Next slide, please. So the next home is in Greenwood. It's getting started in 2 weeks. This is David Bishala, and they're going to have Caesar, next slide, live in their backyard. Next slide. What's that?
Has he been living in Georgetown?
No, nope, not that I know of. He's been outside, he's been in shelters. He's lived a lot at Gasworks Park. Susan, you? Next slide. This is Lex and Marianne. They're going to have a home in their backyard in Crown Hill. They're in their 80s. A woman from Mary's Place with a newborn that would have been going to a car will now be sleeping and living in a block project in their backyard. Next slide. This is Nathan and Sonia and Sky and Ocean, and they live in the Central District. They're going to have Shelley. Go ahead. Live in their backyard, and Shelley's house will be the first completely off-grid home, which will be our 4th home. Actually, it'll be our 5th home. The Pacific Science Center also, we're building one in the Pacific Science Center. It'll be a 4-month exhibit. And they're giving us a whole chunk of space inside that we're going to create a backyard in and have people go through a back door, enter into this whole world of how you can change your view by opening your backyard to someone who is in need. Next slide. Is that it? So I want to just ask one stop. Well, that one, I missed the 5-minute one. That one just says stop. Okay, I just want to ask one quick favor. Just begin. Just begin. Wherever you are on this journey of opening yourself to people that are suffering outside, just begin. Make one friend outside, whether it's Real Change, newspaper vendor, someone on the freeway off-ramp. Just begin. Thank you. I think we're having a
Yeah, hold your questions. I can. Thank you, Rex. We thought that presentation a year ago was really powerful and compelling, and I felt that it was a lot more powerful and compelling now that we have some people underway getting into that. And a couple of things to segue into our next speaker this is about building community, sharing your spaces, and bringing people who you may have not created a relationship with before, getting into your life and getting to know somebody and getting to work with somebody. And as you noticed, a lot of the people who are taking place or participating in the block project are older. Johnny's 75. Johnny? Bobby, excuse me. Bobby's 75. And you know, he is looking for a place to live. He may stay in the block project home for several years, and hopefully he finds that it's ergonomically correct and that it's easy for him to live in. And helping you know, our folks who are maybe being priced out, perhaps their home is their major asset. They're looking for ways to continue to afford living in their neighborhoods as prices rise in Seattle. That's like a real issue for a lot of people, as well as dealing with struggling of opening doors and walking up and down stairs. Our next speaker is Eva Otto. She's a specialist in these types of issues. I was talking with the committee and they said we should give her the entire 90-minute section. So I'm going to step off and give her as much time as we can. And with no further ado, Eva Otto.
Hello everyone, my name is Eva Otto, and I'm really happy to be here, and thanks to the Guild for having me come and talk about this really important issue, which is affordable housing models for aging in place. And so
you have, that's not her presentation. Hers is affordable housing models for aging in place. There it is. Yep, you got it. There we go. Next.
Great. So a little bit about me is I've been a longtime member of the Guild. I've been with the Guild for 15 years. I own a real estate company in Fremont. We specialize in green housing and sustainable development, and we think a lot about affordability and social impacts of housing, as well as environmental issues. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about what aging in place is, what it looks like, why there are obstacles to it, and then what the key components of success is when you're aging in place. And I'm going to look at a market-based approach. I do work in real estate. I'm not going to really talk about what the public programs are or what the public assistance is, but what people are doing today with taking a look at what's happening in the market. And so we're going to talk about shared living models, which we're calling co-living, and we're going to talk about shared ownership models, which we're talking about is called co-buying. So aging in place is really just simply the ability to stay in your home and age around your neighborhood and your family, and having the ability, no matter what your age is or what your income is, to be able to continue to live at home. And you know, when people are surveyed, 80 to 90% of people over 65 say they want to age in their place, and they want to stay in their place. You know, many people know the Ballard Block Project. This was Edith Macefield's house, and she was a 90-plus-year-old woman who decided that she was not going to move. And I can tell you, I'm somebody who works with people. My job is to help them move. It is one of the biggest stressors in life. There are 5 big stressors, right? We're talking about divorce, death, illness, losing a job, and moving. It doesn't matter what age you are. When you move, you get very stressed out. It's hard to leave your friends or your family or your neighborhood. And so I work in land assembly, and I see this all the time. There's always one person who, doesn't matter how much money you offer them, it doesn't matter what a great alternative you give them, they are not going to leave their community. And so this is an issue that's really facing at least a third of the households. We have someone who's getting into a position to age in place or is over 60. There's a lot of factors that come into why someone who wants to age in place can't, but it has a lot to do with health and homes, and that's something I think a lot about is healthy homes. And so what happens is as we age, we have changing healthcare needs, and oftentimes we'll have a health concern that can then compound into a house concern because our failing health makes it hard for us to keep up with the maintenance of our house, and then our house goes into disrepair. Or maybe there's an environmental issue in our house, such as mold or something that's making us sick. And so oftentimes we can kind of be on this hamster wheel between having a healthy home and being able to maintain the home. And so whether it's loss of mobility or just other factors, cost of living is always a big issue where, prices are going up, and inflation and rising utility bills. I mean, there's a lot of people who are aging in place and living alone, but they're still living in their big family home and they're still heating it, and it's costing them $300 to $500 a month. Now, there are public assistance options for utility bills and even for property taxes. Some seniors can get exemptions, but the real issue is that you still have overall rising costs. And so I think that safety is a big issue that we don't often talk about when aging in place, whether it's just safety issues around mobility, not being able to have the same eyesight, or maybe there's issues within the home that are safety issues. There's also external safety issues. So older people are often targeted with criminal activity. So at least where I'm from in Philadelphia, a lot of the older people in my neighborhood were often targeted to being robbed. I got a call a couple of years ago from my grandfather who said, "Your brother's in jail. He needs money." And I was like, "No, that's a scam." But it often happens that safety is a major concern, especially if you're living alone. There's also great components that make us successful when we're talking about aging in place. And so I kind of put the 5 key components to success. The number one key is really choice. In terms of people are choosing to live at home, and being able to choose to be in your place and be able to get the services that you need while you're there is important, and it's also an economic choice. So having the ability to age at home means partly having the economic choice to age at home. And it also means having the flexibility to have services come into your home. So maybe you need a caretaker to come into your home, or maybe you need service to have access to healthcare outside of the home. But having flexibility for your changing healthcare needs is important to success. So entrepreneurship is something I'm going to talk about tonight in terms of the models that are coming up for affordable housing for aging in place, because it really is a key component. How can you use your house to offset your income, and all of the creative ideas that are coming out of that? So entrepreneurship is a key role. Mixing the generations is also a key to success for aging in place. A lot of the affordable housing models that are coming up are intergenerational, and when we mix generations, we continue to have an aging population that is continuing to be a healthy contributor to a community. So a lot of times, older people need some younger people to do some chores around the house, and they can hire a teenager in the community, or a parent needs childcare that maybe a grandparent can provide. And so there's an amazing amount of quality of life and issues that come up with mixing generations. And it's also really important to having a healthy community. Smart growth, many of us here are really support green building and smart growth. It's part of one of the main keys to being able to age in place. If you lose your ability to drive, but you can still take a bus, then you're still having a really positive, independent life. Or if you need walkability to get services, or if you want to just stay engaged in the community and you want to walk to your church. So having smart growth, having transportation, having dense neighborhoods to walk in is important. So let's talk about the shared living models. What is co-living? Well, co-living is really simply living with other people that you know that aren't really related to you, that share a set of interests and values, and it could be related to you as well. But it's so my favorite model with that's coming up for affordable housing and aging in place is the connection between seniors and students. And what we're seeing here is across the country and really all around the world now, we're seeing that nursing homes are inviting students to residencies where they offer free rent for students to come in and provide music lessons or painting lessons to folks in the nursing homes, or in some cases they'll have students live independently with an older person and do a work exchange, maybe 20 hours a week. Universities across the country like NYU are discovering that there's actually a tremendous amount of untapped affordable housing options in cities across the country. And so in places like New York City, where the cost of living is extremely high and the cost of housing students is incredibly high, they've adopted a program where they're matching their students with people who are aging in place and seniors. And so what happens is that the student gets their room and board tuition cut in half, and the senior gets a student to live with them and gets income, and therefore increases their ability to finance their home and their bills. And a beautiful, and what doesn't get talked about is beautiful social capital that arises out of this relationship where the younger person gets the wisdom and the knowledge of their older roommate, and the older person gets the enthusiasm and the liveliness and the modern day topics and trends of what's going on in maybe in the younger generation, which maybe they don't have access to. But it solves two problems, which is two affordability problems. One is the affordability issue that millennials are facing, and then also allowing people to stay in their homes longer and have income on the aging in place side. So this idea has become so popular that some students at MIT developed a app, which was a little bit kind of like what Rex was talking about. It's a matchmaking app between older people who are aging in place and students. And so now, if you're living in Chicago or San Francisco or New York, you don't have to wait to get connected to a university. You can go on nesterly.com, you can fill out a profile, and you can get matched up with a student. And the positive aspect for the person that's older is that this is Nesterly is vetting the student, and maybe they're doing a background check or something like that, where it's better than going on Craigslist. So you can go on Craigslist and you can roll the dice for a roommate, or in this case you can open up your home to a student. And because these MIT students knew that there are obstacles to aging in place, they set up this app to also include the option to provide chores or to do a work trade. So you can get an even lower rent by agreeing to cook a few meals a week, or agreeing to spend some time, or take somebody to the doctor, or if it snows out, 1 month you can get $100 off your rent just by shoveling the snow. So it's not required, but it is an ability for anyone, anywhere, to kind of tap in to having access to bringing in somebody into their home through a vetted process that they feel safe about. And so I think that this is an excellent example of how the market is taking an approach to providing affordable housing, because the MIT students, their research showed that there was 50 million untapped empty rooms across America that could be being rented out in homes with people who are 60 or older. And so it's really a great option for when you're looking at what the market-based approaches are. There's another, I wanted to share this story. This is actually someone in my neighborhood. He's here tonight. His name is Greg. And he is sharing his yard. So Greg's just told us about you know, these great options where you have a single family home and you can share your yard and put a tiny home in it to kind of increase community, increase affordable housing. There's also the potential to do it in another way, which is in neighborhoods like mine in Fremont. There's a lot of single family homes that are now in multi-family zoned property. So we've been upzoned, but there's still plenty of single family homes. And a lot of people are getting bombarded with, you know, with letters and calls, hey, I want to buy your house, I want to redevelop it. And some people are selling and then moving out of the neighborhood. So that's an option. But what I love about this model, and I encourage folks who own land in multifamily zones to really consider this is an owner redevelopment where there was a single family house here that was torn down, and in its place, essentially 4 new housing units were built. The owner is going to stay and live in one of the single family houses. The 2 in the front are family size, 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, single family homes. There's an elementary school in walking distance, and then there's 1 additional bedroom ADU unit. And there's a real strong community design and focus. So there's a community courtyard. Everybody has rooftop decks with great views. What's important about this story is that the owner, who's owned the house for a long time, decided instead of selling it to a builder or to mostly builders, because that's who's bombarding everyone, that he was going to redevelop it. And he was going to redevelop it with a community focus. He looked around and he saw what was being built by other builders, and he didn't like those designs, and he wanted to embellish the community. He wanted to stay in the community and embellish it and create community as he lived there. So instead of moving out of the neighborhood, he's going to be living in one of the houses. He's going to be renting 3 of the units. And what's important about that is that his focus is not necessarily on maximizing his rents for, you know, the people who live in his community, but he's expressed an interest to have places that if people couldn't afford max rents, that they would still be able to live in the community. And so this is another story about taking personal responsibility and saying, I'm going to share my yard, build more housing, and share it with people who potentially might not be able to pay full market rent. And so if anyone's interested in learning more about Greg and his story and this model, he's here tonight, or I can help connect you. Briefly, I'm going to touch on micro-housing because David's going to talk about it more, but micro-housing is a definite trend for affordability and aging in place. And there are people who are really exciting trend is tiny home communities, but there's also trends of moving into what is traditionally looked at as millennial housing, these co-living spaces. So people may have heard of co-working, they've heard of WeWork or the Hub. Now we're going to have co-living. So WeWork is developing this building in Seattle. There's going to be 36 stories of micro-housing units for temporary or long-term housing. And so instead of continuing to age in your home, you could potentially co-live in a multi-generational environment in the downtown of Seattle and have a really exciting, you know, intergenerational life. So I think that there are a lot of options for people when they're aging to think about co-living. It's not just living in your home, but it could be living in community in another way. And So shared ownership models are another way to create affordability. And so what is co-buying and who's co-buying? Co-buying is essentially buying real estate with one or more people who you're not married to. So you can, a lot of times people are buying with their family or with their friends, and it's a great way to get your purchasing power up, because in a market like Seattle, it's very difficult to afford to buy a house on your own, especially, well, just about in any neighborhood. So I want to just touch on cooperative housing and talk about how it's different than co-buying, because a lot of people are familiar with the co-housing or the co-housing and the cooperative model. So cooperatives were really the original model for affordable housing, where it started in New York and people band together and formed a corporation to buy property and build. And the difference between a cooperative and a co-buying model is that the cooperative is an ownership model where you own shares in a corporation. You don't actually own physical property. It's very democratic, it's private, your information is shielded from tax records and things like that. It's less expensive if you're banding together with someone to build. Because you're getting your home at cost, you're not getting a spec home, and it's easy to live there and age in place, or it's easy to sell and move on. And so it's kind of fallen out of style to develop a cooperative, but it's still absolutely a model for co-buying or co-sharing together. Most people today go towards a co-housing model. Co-housing model is more of condominium ownership, where you don't own shares in a corporation, but you own fee simple your box, and then you own a shared common area. So that's a little different than what I'm talking about with co-buying. Co-buying, I'm mostly talking about tenant in common agreements for fee simple property. And so life goals, we all want to be like the Golden Girls and move in with our besties when we get older and have a great time. And so that is absolutely a trend that's happening. There's a lot of people who are deciding, well, you know, we're going to co-buy together. I mean, I can afford this and you can afford that, and maybe it's not equal, but a tenant in common agreement will allow you to co-purchase with people and then divide it up differently. So you could have a 20%, a 40%. And you know, the biggest thing about co-buying is that it allows people to be in their community. It avoids predatory lending processes like reverse mortgages and getting people into a situation where they go into debt. If you can have somebody come in and buy half your house and have a cash infusion so that you don't have to borrow to continue to maintain the home, not only do you reduce your costs, maybe somebody buys in 50% of your house, now you're paying 50% less in maintenance costs, 50% less in taxes, and so it's definitely a positive, and I'm going to try to hurry up here because I'm taking too much time, but so co-buying with family, this is a big one. We've heard a lot about granny flats in the backyard or backyard cottages, so this is another way you can kind of share your yard or create a tenant in common agreement where there's ownership for the backyard cottage. Instead of people buying a condo in Fort Lauderdale and moving out of town, now they can actually build a house in the backyard of their children's home, and they can have intergenerational living, or they can set up a relationship with someone else. Maybe it's not exactly their family, but they can build a tiny home and stay in the community and stay in the neighborhood. It's a great option for parents. I see a lot of parents today helping their children buy. My mother helped my brother buy a house. It has a mother-in-law unit in it. She's looking at it as for future security so that she will be able to have a place to retire to, or if she has a disability, she'll have a home, and she'll have a family that will take care of her. And this is another shared ownership model similar to the one I showed in Fremont, where there was an intention. You had two families living in a single family home. They tore it down and they built 4 single family houses. They each lived in one, and they sold off the other two, which brought their own existing mortgages way down. They did a community design, and most importantly, they built it so that they could age in place. They're not baby boomers, they're more kind of Gen Xers, but they built in an affordability complex with having each house have a first floor ADU unit. So now every house has the ADU, has an affordable unit built in. If they have a problem or a disability, they can move into the one level floor unit and rent out their upper unit. And so this is another market approach to co-living and co-owning property together. So that's pretty much it, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
All right, moving right along. David Neiman is an architect who has worked really extensively in micro-congregate housing and small efficiency dwelling units, which has been emergent over the last few years. He ran into some legal hurdles with his designs just in the last couple of years, and we want to take a look at, what does urban micro-congregate housing look like in the future? What is a small efficiency dwelling unit, and what kind of solutions are they providing for the community, and how is this a piece of solving the affordable housing crisis in Seattle? With no further ado, David Neiman.
Thanks. So I have my own practice. I've been working on my own for almost 20 years now. And when I got started, I was doing single family homes. And one of the things that really turned me on about that work was the idea of creating homes that were really open and porous and connected the interior living spaces to exterior living spaces to the landscape beyond. About 10 years ago, I started getting involved in doing kind of small multifamily housing projects, lots of townhomes. And when I kind of took the approach that I developed for single family out into the multifamily world, what you discover is when you walk out those doors and connect to the outside, what you also connect to is other people. And so we started really getting the idea of shared space and courtyards and places that would help to build community among people that were living together in these small pieces of land. As Seattle's boom has gone on and affordability has become sort of like reached crisis levels in our city, we've become more interested in market models that can help us create kind of small, affordable and abundant housing. But and we've particularly gotten involved in congregate micro-housing because it's something that it's a type of housing that automatically has this kind of community element built into it, which we'll kind of talk about some more. And then finally, we've started to develop these projects ourselves to kind of push the ideas that we're trying to develop even further, and then have had to become advocates in the public sphere to start to deal with all of the regulatory challenges that have come along to trying to put this type of housing out into the marketplace. So with that kind of background in mind, I just want to sort of share a little bit of the kind of work that we've been doing, the lessons we've learned, and hopefully convey to you some of the enthusiasm that we've developed for congregate microhousing as being a really important tool in the toolkit for providing affordable, abundant housing that can be provided by market rate developers. So just to background, this is the last 100 years in Seattle. This is our population growth. We grew really precipitously as a city through 1960. After 1960, Seattle, along with like most cities in America, went into a state of population decline. We had the general suburbanization. We had white flight. We had the Civil Rights Act. We had school segregation and school busing, and all these kind of things that led to a kind of a long-term decline in both kind of the cultural currency and the population of cities. In Seattle, some cities that has never turned around. In Seattle, that turned around in about 1980, and we began to grow again. And then by 2000, we kind of recovered. Go ahead. The population that we had up to that point go again. And now we've kind of moved into a really precipitous increase in population. Now this feels anomalous to us because, go ahead, for people like myself, my generation, my parents' generation, a lot of people who have a lot of the political power and a lot of the wealth and currency within our culture, we came to Seattle, got our housing, got established in an era of really, really cheap housing, and it was driven not because that's normal. It was driven because we were occupying a city that was partly empty, and that's part of the difficulty that we have now is we think of what we're living in now as being an anomaly. It's not. This is actually what cities are. They are places of aggregation, of growth and change and ambition, and cities have to struggle to find ways to bring new people into the city and accommodate them. But we think that what you should be able to do is walk into the city, find cheap housing, buy a house, and go. And that's absent, another sort of multi-generational economic decline and depopulation is not what our future is. So go ahead. At the turn of the century, cities had ways of creating housing abundance that were primarily about sharing housing. So if you weren't living in the turn of the century, if you weren't living in a single family home, you were probably living in some form of shared housing, a lodging house, a hotel, a boarding house, rooming house, something like that. And then apartments and single residence occupancy hotels, those were innovations that developed to sort of help to create abundant housing within rapidly growing cities. Around the 1920s, there was a big movement to create zoning within cities, and that was in a theoretical sense, it was about making sure you didn't build pickle factories next to elementary schools. But the kind of the emotional currency behind it was so that single-family house owners wouldn't have an apartment building next to them. That was the great terror that motivated a lot of citizen participation in getting zoning to happen in their communities. And that, go ahead. That as a society, as we've grown wealthier and our expectations for what middle class housing has grown over time, we gradually enshrined the single family home as sort of the ideal to which we should all aspire, and we started to codify that in our zoning to sort of make it so that was the kind of housing that worked, and other things that were denser and sort of could accommodate more people were more and more difficult to replicate over time. Go ahead. Yeah, actually, go ahead. So, in the current day, where we kind of got into, most cities have density restrictions and parking requirements and a whole stew of other regulations that make it impossible to replicate the kind of dense, abundant housing that we were just able to kind of create organically 100 years ago. Seattle has probably gone further than almost any other city in rolling some of those back, and we've actually got to a point now where we've rolled back our explicit parking requirements in our urban villages. We've gotten rid of density limits in most of the growth areas of the city. What we haven't, we haven't really found a way. We have such a difficult regulatory environment. We don't yet have a way for market housing to be a real participant in creating affordable housing sort of organically through market forces. And what we've tried to do is instead create it through subsidies. And so like our current way of sort of envisioning how we provide affordable housing for people is that we provide subsidies through nonprofits by tax credits and grants. And it's a very important part of our kind of way of providing social good for people that desperately need it. But the math of it makes it very difficult. There's tremendous need within our society. There's only so much subsidy to go around, and this is a very, very expensive way to provide affordable housing for people, and it really leads to a chronic undersupply of this valuable resource. There's way too many people competing for way too few spots. So, go ahead. If we look at, this is from the American Community Survey, it's kind of the latest one from 2016. If you kind of look at Seattle and a distribution of income and who can afford their housing, about 2/3 of Seattleites can afford market rate housing. The more wealthy you are, the more easy it is to afford. But basically, within what we define as affordability, which is spending 30% of your income on housing, there's a market rate solution for about 2/3 of Seattleites. For the third that's left, about half of those folks, their needs are so profound, they need some form of social housing, some form of subsidy that comes from society at large. there's not going to be a market rate solution for them. And then there's the folks, the yellow band, they're kind of in the middle. These are folks that they're working, they're making a living, but they don't make enough money to comfortably afford market rate housing solutions in the sort of conventional way that we deliver them. And these are the folks for whom micro-housing is a really important solution. They're not poor enough that they're really the target of our social housing subsidies, but they're not wealthy enough to be comfortable with the conventional ways we have to deliver market rate housing. So just to define micro-housing, I could spend an hour on this, but I'm going to spend 30 seconds. There's two forms of micro-housing. One is a small efficiency dwelling. It's essentially a studio apartment. It's just downsized. It's about 20% smaller than a conventional studio apartment can be. And the rent is correspondingly a little bit lower. But it's basically, you know, conventional housing. The form that we're most interested in is what's called congregate micro-housing. And those are units that have become small enough that they don't contain all of the components of a legal dwelling unit. There's something missing. And those components are provided outside of the unit in a shared space. So go ahead. So in our projects, your typical private rooms, you've got a bed space, a desk space, a little kitchenette that doesn't have a cooking space. It's like a motel kitchenette. You've got storage areas, you've got a private bathroom. And then outside of your units, we're going to provide common amenities. So there'll be a common kitchen, dining area, lounge, and then some other things like maybe TV spaces or study areas, depending upon the cohort that we're kind of targeting. And then one key component, I think this is not well understood, but it's really important to understanding the basic idea behind micro-housing is these are when they're done successfully, they're done in buildings without an elevator. And the reason for this isn't just that elevators are expensive, it's that the way our codes work, if you put an elevator in a building, you're then required to create that every single unit on every single floor needs to be an accessible unit. That's our fair housing laws. What that means when you do it is that your maneuvering spaces get big, your hallways get big, your bathrooms get big, your kitchenettes get big, and your units, they bump up about 50% in size. The unit count goes down, which really kind of just craters the whole economic rationale behind micro-housing in the first place. So essentially, if you're going to successfully develop micro-housing, it needs to be in a small, kind of low-scale walk-up building. Go ahead. So just kind of looking at the details of a typical unit in one of our projects. So just a little axionometric showing kind of the organization of it with so you've got, well, too hard to point to, but one of the sort of the nicest features that we see usually on the top level of projects is that in addition to the kind of the bed and desk space and the bathroom and the kitchenette and the storage is that you can put a loft into them. It gives you a place to put your bed up. And that way it takes that little living area instead of being entirely filled by your bed. Now you have an opportunity for a little furniture setting. So it's a really great kind of livability addition to a small unit. And then on the same level, at every level in the building, we'll have what we call a pajama commons. So this is going to be typically a kitchen and a dining area. It's something that provides, you know, that kind of informal place where you're going to meet the folks who live on your floor a little bit more frequently. You don't really have to be, you're not going to be necessarily really put together, but you're going to get to know those people a little bit better than the rest of the folks in the building. Go ahead. And then on the main floor, this is where we usually provide the bulk of the common space. So this is the accessible level. We'll have all of our accessible units there. Typically you have kind of a big living room, dining area, kitchen, and then, you know, some of those other amenities like this project has a TV lounge, has a study space because it's near a university, and it has a bathroom to use on that level, as well as it's actually like a really cool feature of this project, which it has the shared laundry is right by the front door. So you take this chore that's usually kind of stuffed down in the basement, and you put it something where it's just like right by the front door, people see it coming and going, and it can turn that kind of mundane activity into something that kind of facilitates chance interaction where you can kind of run into your neighbors and get to know them. So, go ahead. So anyways, why do we care about micro-housing? So the first and the most key fundamental element of that is affordability. So in our projects, we always participate in a program called the multifamily tax exemption. That means that we get a property tax break in exchange for which a quarter of our units get rented out at 40% AMI. What that means is it's essentially affordable to people who make minimum wage. And it's including utilities. So it's like a really, really important rent level. That's a quarter of the units. The rest of the units rent at the market rate level, which these days is running around $975,000. That's affordable to someone who's making about $37,000 to $40,000 a year. It's also, from a sustainability standpoint, micro-housing, you know, the projects we build, they're all 4-star built green. They're all good buildings, but we're not trying to get at some extraordinary level of sort of, you know, reduced energy use, but just by their very nature, the energy per person in the building is so much lower than a conventional apartment building that they use about 1/3 of the energy per person of a conventional apartment building. It's like a staggering energy savings just through density. And then lastly is the component of community, and I can't undersell this. This is a type of housing which puts you into constant contact with other people in a way that can, and it just facilitates day-to-day meeting other people, building social capitals, kind of creating connections among people. So it's not just something that's about living cheaply, but it's a way to live better. I mean, we're seeing this actually kind of catch fire up and down the social spectrum, where people are kind of seeking out these kind of co-living opportunities, not for affordability, but just because it's desirable. And this is a way to take both of those things and pair them together. So who lives in micro-housing? It's, you know, it's a lot of students, it's a lot of millennials, a lot of young people. It's also a lot of people you wouldn't expect. People just kind of are in life transitions, kind of, you know, going from one stage of life to another, divorcees, people kind of going through new experiences and trying new things, moving to new cities. And then there's this really interesting component, which is that we get approached by a lot of people who are like, they're trying to find housing for some form of cohort. Maybe they're a nonprofit and they're trying to find housing to serve people that they serve, or they're just an interest group of people that are looking to, you know, find some way to create housing where we can all live together. It's a really interesting group of people that come and you know, to us to see if this is something that we can, you know, find a way to develop a project for them. The answer is usually we'd love to. We're looking for land, we're trying, but it's very difficult, and we'll get to that part of stuff. Go ahead. So, anyways, we've sort of reached a point within the city that we've actually structurally removed a lot. Seattle, unique among almost all cities, has removed explicit density limits. We've removed parking requirements. There's a lot of components in place that can facilitate a lot of abundant, dense, affordable, kind of, you know, organically occurring affordable housing. But go ahead. There is a the resistance is really at a level that's a cultural resistance, and there has been essentially political accommodation of that cultural resistance that's really damaged our ability to kind of deliver this type of housing. So go ahead. So this is just, I don't know if you guys can read this, but basically the statistics on micro-housing development, it kind of started to show up around 2009. The first projects kind of came into the marketplace. There was a couple hundred a year for a couple years. In 2011, there was a code change that removed density and parking in urban villages. All of a sudden, this housing type exploded, and we started getting 1,200 and 1,800 units a year. Really kind of went through the roof. And then in 2014, that's when when the hammer fell. So the city council passed a series of restrictions on micro-housing, which what they did is they basically said, well, you can build micro-housing, but only in these very, very specific places. And it turns out those very, very specific places are not places where you might think to develop micro-housing, and the places where you were got basically decimated. What all of that energy has shifted over into the production of small efficiency dwelling. It's really a ton of small efficiency dwelling. It's over 1,000 a year. So there's a really robust, great production of, again, this important form of slightly cheaper and slightly denser housing. But we've really, really restricted our ability to develop congregate housing, which I think is the more important tool in the toolbox. So in 2014, before 2014, you could develop congregate micro-housing in any multifamily zone, basically, any L zone, any commercial zone, anywhere within an urban village. Right? After 2014, those restrictions were limited to specific zones that were, so all these zones, but go ahead. Those zones are mostly not places that have low height limits. limits. And you need something that has relatively modest height limits so you can build a wall. So, you know, allowing me to develop congregate housing in high-rise zones isn't a great help. It's essentially saying, go ahead and try, but it's a de facto ban. So, and then there's also, go ahead, a requirement that you have to be within an urban village, which actually turns out a lot of the commercial zoning that has lower height limits is not in villages. And so, go ahead, the Venn diagram where all overlaps, it's really small, and it's not. You might think that that's an exaggeration, but go ahead to the map. This is the map that we have in our office. This is the map that I created of where to prospect for land where congregate housing is legal. It's a little hard to see, but the green area are urban villages where that's where multifamily housing is allowed. And the blue and the purple and the red, those are the neighborhood commercial and commercial zones where it's both legal and of a reasonable height limit where you can do a walkout. So this is and the intention was that these things would be allowed in the densest part of our urban villages and urban centers. But if you kind of look at where the map is lit up, it's not there. What it's done, it's been exiled off into the Aurora corridor and into the Rainier Valley corridor. And there's these little teeny little unicorn spots, which is where we've been able to find our projects. But they're really, really, really hard to find. That's the good news. The bad news is that it's about to get worse. So if you go to the next one, I'm probably going to have you toggle back and forth because so go ahead and go back one. Go back one. And that's today. What we're about to do is pass mandatory housing affordability, which are the up zones that are going to allow greater amounts of development in exchange for affordability, either through payment or participation. What most of those up zones are going to do is they're going to change C1 and C2 zoning to NC2. NC2 does not allow congregate housing. They're also going to change most of the 40-foot zoning to 75-foot zone. So if you go to the map and just go to the next slide, this is what happens after MHA. So go before and go to after. And what you can see is that, the areas that were barely existent before, they've lost, like these little unicorn areas like along 15th and over in the Roy corridor and so forth, they're almost gone. And I've run out of time. And so go ahead, we'll just keep going. So just last thing, there's also a little thing coming up that's going to, there's a change coming up for how bike parking is going to work. It's a proposal that sounds great, which is that the city council has proposed that every project has to provide one bike parking stall for every unit, and that those bike parking stalls have to be in a place that's convenient, accessible, and you don't have to go up and down stairs to do them, which sounds great. But the mandatory nature of it is extremely challenging for congregate microhousing, which has a need for all these common spaces, and those common spaces need to be at the main floor where they're accessible. So this is one of our projects in Ballard that we're currently designing. And then in this project, almost all the bike parking is in the basement, which is not the best place for bike parking, but we prioritize common space for people and community spaces above it. Go to the next slide. This is what happens when you accommodate the amount of bike parking that you're required to have at that main level, the project. And so you might think I'm being a drama queen, but this is like an existential threat to being able to do the kinds of things that we're doing. You just can't make these projects work without an elevator, and an elevator is game over for small, dense housing like congregate. So way over my time, so I'll leave on a gloomy note. We can pick up the what to do next in Q&A.
Thank you, David. We're going to do a little bit of a transition for our fourth speaker, and we're going to open up for questions in a second. But I just wanted to ask the audience, just by a show of hands, a couple of questions. Has anybody lived in like a substandard, perhaps unapproved, or below grade living condition at some point in their life? Most of the audience, okay? I lived in the foyer of a house in college for a summer. My high school sweetheart's dad lived in the boiler room with his gymnasium in college. let's see, I've lived in a tiny home for a small amount of time, and I'm sure that many of you guys have lived in similar situations. Having your own space and a place that you can call home is extremely important. Housing first is a movement to get people a place that they can call their own, where they're not dealing with structures that are keeping them from being who they are and having that sense of privacy that we really value in our community. And so I just wanted to kind of think about that for a second and then open up for a couple of questions. Does anybody have a question for our panelists as we begin to transition here? No questions. No questions yet. A zillion. Perhaps Pat is already ready. Our next speaker, did anybody have a chance to go and see the exhibit outside before the session? By a show of his experience, living small, having a tiny house, and some would say it's incognito. And our presentation is going to be an interview format with a couple of slides as well. So I will give it away to Pat Park and William Thompson.
Right next to it. Hi folks, my name is William. And is that better? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Then you're reading it like. Okay. I can do that. So I apologize for my enormous scandal of intolerance. For those of you that don't know, my truck was stolen the other night while I was sleeping in it. And when I saw that it was going to go under a bridge by Golden Gardens, I had to jump out because I didn't know if the roof was going to collapse or not. So here I am, and I'm happy to be here.
Privilege on Saturday to interview William in his home. And I had a lot of questions about his truck. And so I wanted to do this in 3 parts. The first part is some of the assets that he constructed. And then the third, William has a vision. I'm not going to give it away, but he has a vision about what he has started with Box Truck. So William, could you tell us what brought you to this point in your life where you felt that you needed to invest so much time and energy in doing Box Truck? Can you give us a history and mention some turning points in your life that really brought this home?
Okay. I didn't have a real good childhood, let's just say that, and we'll leave it there. And so I ran away from home when I was really young, and a family had kind of picked me up off the street. And I never got into drugs or anything like that. I didn't like what was happening at my house, so I left. When I was 16 years old, a family had picked me up and they had rodeoed for a living, and I found it really interesting. I chose to be a rodeo clown because they got paid no matter what, and everyone else seemed to be paying, and I thought that was stupid. So I was willing to sacrifice my body for whatever money I made, and I go around and travel and see people and meet people. meet different energy, other things in the world. And it was just, I know that money does not buy you happiness. And so I didn't choose a path in life that involved the money. I chose a path in life that involved just helping people, because I don't want people to hurt. I don't want them to experience the stuff that I've gone through in life. It's been kind of a crazy journey. I take a lot of blows in life because I think I do a lot of good for people and I have a really good heart. Sometimes I think that energy just sort of follows that, because in order for there to be daylight, there has to be darkness. For there to be happiness, and so forth. And it's a big circle to always help people whenever they need it, no matter what. Stand up for what's right. And to find joy in my own heart, sharing that with other people. Eventually, I learned, I've been living tiny my whole life. I've been living I lived in a wall tent, school bus, car. I lived in a Volkswagen. I lived in a wall tent for 236 days in Idaho through the winter. I fished for my food. I bought land on the Salmon River. I bought land on the Wise River. And I lost it all. I had a brain aneurysm. All the things that I ever wanted in life just disappeared right before my eyes because I'd broken my back and my neck so many times that eventually formed a pool of blood in my brain, and they put these stents in the back of my brain. I often think about my favorite president, Theodore Roosevelt, when he stood up and he said, "It takes more than a bullet to bring down a bulldozer." Because I got a lot of fight in me. I come from nothing. All I got is this vision and this energy that flows through me. And so I tapped into this thing called the law of attraction, and I practiced it. Visualized my life being better and helping people. And I can see it clearly. It's how I've gotten everything in life. It's how I've acquired every, what I call riches. I fulfilled almost all of my dreams. I have a few more. The tiny house in the micro in the it's a conglomeration of all these little ideas I had in all of my little builds, and I had a vision on how I wanted to build it, but I'm not a builder. I've never really built anything in my life. I'm great at designing stuff, but then, you know, I put it on paper and I look at it on paper and I look at my tool selection and I'm thinking, oh, it's not going to work. And so, you know, I go to plan B and I just sort of flowed like that, you know, like a river. And so I picked this box truck specifically because they're designed to carry a lot of weight and move around very condensed cities. It turns on the dime, it goes up and down hills, no problem. Goes 70 miles an hour, it gets 13 miles an hour. It's diesel. It's a turbo diesel, which means I can convert it to run pure vegetable grease. So not only do I not pay any rent, pretty soon I'll only be paying for fuel, and it makes me happy. Little things in life. Yeah, that's why I bought the truck.
Are you going to mention about the fishing?
Oh, well, fishing is my life. I tapped into a source of energy on a river one day when this guy taught me how to fly fish. And it's one of the only things I've experienced other than surfing or kayaking where everything is flowing all together at the same long. It's almost beautiful, relaxing. It carries all of your sources away. And it's the most spiritual feeling. And so I built my rig as a fly fishing rig. It's basically a mobile fly fishing lodge. When it's all done, it'll be practically four-wheel drive. It'll go anywhere. It'll be self-contained. I'm going to have an electric toilet in it. I'm going to push a button. It's going to turn it into right, it is what it is. But it's basically a place where I can just go and tie my flies and spend some time in solitude and fish and contemplate life in general. And my goal moving to Seattle was to build this truck. I didn't know how I was going to do it because I was having seizures after my brain surgery and I wasn't allowed to drive. I lost my license. And my sister was going to give me a car, a really good brand new car. And I was able to vision trading in a car, buying a truck. I had it all in my head. I saw it all clear as day. And somehow I pulled that stuff off. Because I set it in motion. I mean, I pulled it off. But I thought about it, I meditated on it, and it came to pass. I had a 5-year plan, and June 5 years will be here. I was just a bike messenger. I worked for that guy, my best friend. Rode a bike in any direction. I just knew I needed to move to Seattle because this is pretty much the city of opportunity. And I knew that. So, and it had a good transit system for, someone who doesn't drive. Then I got my license back. That changed. And the world started opening up again. And all my dreams, all this dream that I had built in my head, it became a reality. And so, it changed right now. I have a job that's really inside. It's doing nerve damage. I make lacquer for a living. I work at a company called Rudd and Ballard, and I've been wanting out for a long time. And the universe lined that up for me. This tiny truck. I literally show my tiny truck to maybe 30, 40 people on any given Saturday or Sunday. They're so intrigued by it, like how I pulled this whole thing off. And really, it's just a bunch of creative artwork.
So let's take a look at some of that. So here is William's truck. Go ahead. Before we get into that, I wanted to introduce Eileen Oney. If you haven't heard of her, take a look at her videos. She has an amazing story that she documented of how, this is a professional that's doing a good job, but she's got a ton of loans. And she had to find a way to pay down those loans, and she decided she was going to take the time to live in her car for a year. And she documented the whole thing. It's all on YouTube. Go to YouTube, Eileen Oney. Next slide. She has a TED Talk. It's called Rebellion. And for those of you in the tiny house movement, I think you can relate to that because a lot of what we're facing is because of the institutionalization of market rate housing. So take a look at this. I wish I could show it to you, but just wanted to introduce you to the extremes that we are going through to live in our society. So why a box truck? I took this photo last Saturday, and this to me was one of the reasons why William did his box truck. He can park his house almost anywhere he wants in the house.
you don't know it's a house.
Right.
You know, it's just a work truck as far as I mean, people think I bake bread and they're lined up out here with baskets sometimes waiting for me to open. And when I open up, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, all I have are dollar bills. You can have that.
So the side of the truck says,
It's a bread company in Arizona.
next slide. Okay, that's the bucket.
Fresh baked local. Oh, no, maybe fresh baked local bread, something like that.
So this is one of the things that Eileen in her YouTube, she talks a lot about how to be stealthy and be able to park in safe places and places that you want to be. Next slide. Another view of the box truck. Next slide. The front door.
Yeah, front back. So yeah, I've always wanted a double Dutch door because sometimes I don't want people, walking by and seeing what I'm doing, but I still want the view. And I couldn't really afford the $3 million house for the view, but I could afford that. And so that's Golden Gardens, and I just park there on the weekends when I'm not building. When I am building, I go out into either Leavenworth or into the middle of the Snoqualmie, where the ground's uneven, because nothing's really even inside there. Next slide. Oh, yeah. I do look taller, but it's only a 7 foot, it's only 7 feet on, it's 98 square feet altogether. And that's kind of big, because it's a lot bigger than a Westphalia, that's for sure. And I had a 34-foot CT cutter, and it's a lot bigger than that too. It's pretty amazing on how much room there is. It's comfortable. It's home.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Can you imagine this?
So this is a wood stove. It took a lot of research to find one that I wanted that was tiny. So this is my second wood stove. The first one I bought was enormous. It was cast iron, and when I got it, I couldn't even get rid of it. I literally couldn't. I tried to give it to Ballard Reuse. They didn't want it. And so I just kept researching and researching. I found a company in Canada called Cubics, I think, and this is their, it's called the Grizzly. This is their biggest wood stove. And it basically, that wood bin underneath, those are 6-inch pieces. And it's just, at Home Depot, they sell wood at 70% off that's damaged from the coal mine. So I buy say a 20-foot stick of cedar that's normally $40. I get it for like $2. I just chop it up, and it burns for about, that bin right there burns for about a week.
Excellent.
Okay. Oh, that's my favorite. That's my new keg. It keeps your beer ice cold and oxygen free. And it's a CO2 keg. It takes low pressure. It's all. I kind of added some barbed wire because I got friends that like beer. So this is my kitchen. I like copper because it's not real copper, but it's good enough. It's copper coated aluminum, and it just looked like it was. I was going to do it all. I wanted to buy it all in one sheet, but I couldn't find it anywhere in one sheet. So I came up with a solution on how to do this, and it turns out it's a lot of tacks and a lot of sore thumbs. The stove unit was another hard find. It was just a lot of research, and I found it on, I think, Camping World. It's worth every penny.
Excellent.
Oh.
Natural lighting.
So I work at Rudd, and we make lacquer, and we stick them in either little quart cans or gallon cans or 5-gallon cans. These are gold-lined quart cans for really potent chemical stuff. And I knew as soon as I got my truck, I knew it was used. You know, they're free. And during the daytime, the whole entire thing just glows gold. And it really adds just a lot of cool features to the copper. And just, I like the color of gold because I can't afford it. But I like the color. Excellent. So that's, you know, how I insulated it. Basically, like I said, I never really built it before. I just figured that the insulation should go first, and then, you know, how do you hold that up? So I put a board up, OSB board, and I was like, well, that doesn't look good. So I've got some cheap, you know, that's just cedar fencing. And again, if you get it at the 70% off section and the damaged section, it's usually just the tip. So you know, normally they're like $1.50 or, you know, $2. You get it for like 20 cents. So my whole roof was pretty cheap. And that's, yeah, one of the cans. Excellent. That's a score I found at Ballard Reviews. It was like $10. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, I was an executive chef after I got done fighting bulls. And I was a cook, so my kitchen is a major part of my build, and that's a spice rack. I instantly thought this could hold a lot of spices. Next slide. I don't have that many spices because you know, I only cook for myself. I like salt and pepper. Next slide. So I don't know anything about electricity. I just know that I know it hurts when you hit stuff that's not supposed to be hit. And so I figured I would do that last in my build because I just didn't know, and I was too busy trying to build, and I didn't want to have to worry about that. And that's, yeah. Still working. You can imagine how big that hand is. That's a huge thumb, and these tacks that I got to tack are like, I swear to God, this big. And I hit my thumb at least one every tack. And I just go until it can't hurt, until I just can't bear it anymore. Like usually my thumb will be purple, and I'll just take a couple of weeks off. Next slide.
So I was amazed when I talked to William, and he had this vision about what he wanted to do with this first box truck. So can you tell us, you know, what I gathered from that was you were obviously interested in building more of these, so there was an economic reason. But what was profound was that you were interested in not just making money on it, but providing for others. And can you tell us more about that vision?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't care about money at all. I think it's the stupidest idea they ever created. So I want out of my job, right? We all know that. And how do I do that? You start asking the universe how to do it. And so the universe answers you by kids coming into your truck, and they're asking you how they can pull this off because they don't want to pay $850 a month for housing for 4 years or 5 years or 6 years. You go to medical school, maybe more. So I came up with an idea, and I've run it by a few people, and I've got a few people in it, and you know, the law of attraction tells me not to say that I'm going to open up a business. It tells me to believe that I've already opened up a business. So while Pat was visiting with me, I decided right there that this is it. Like, why am I going to start a business? Should I already just? So I've already, you know, I've come up with a business name. I've taken time off work for all of this. I'll go out and get a business license. We're going to start something. But I don't want to make money on it. I personally, money doesn't make me happy. It's never going to. What does make me happy is the fact that I can turn this into an employee-owned company where everyone owns an equal share So everyone profits off everything. So the guy that sweeps the floor is no different than me. You know, I don't care how much footwork I got to put into it. He's no different, not in my eyes. He's just a source of energy. You know, and it's a positive energy. So what's my vision here? Because as you can clearly see, I'm not that great of a builder. But I'm great with designs, and I could put those designs on paper if someone shows me how. I'm very teachable. I learn quick. So I can do that. And then I get a few builders. I got a few builders right now that are involved. And I have the guy that sold me my truck. I have a line on, this guy made millions of dollars selling these trucks. And I got lines on gas trucks and diesel trucks. And this guy will work with me. He's been helping me this entire time. And he's become a really good close friend. And so I already have a line on all these trucks, like an endless supply of trucks. And I think my first order of business is to take care of my students. Because they're our hope, you know? They're our future and our hope. So if a student, what's your average student, food, everything, all that stuff, it's going to come out to about $20,000, $25,000 a year. You know? I can easily build one of these for $10,000 again. I've built mine 5 times, so I really know what not to do. But there's builders that know exactly how to do it. And I can line this up with, just set it all up just for a student, built, designed solely for a student. A desk, computer, line it all up, get it all ready for them, make it solar power, put in the electric toilet, make it all drivable, and then for $25,000, that student, if he's there for 6 years, that's his rent for 6 years. So all that other rent, that can go towards when he gets out of college, like paying off that huge debt he's going to have or she's going to have. I don't want to erase that. I want to help these kids out. You know, they don't have a lot going for them at the rate everything's spiking. I make $60,000 a year, and I can afford to live like you guys, but I can't afford to save up and buy a piece of property and build a house. You know, it's all gone at the end of my 2 weeks. And so, why not put something back into a kid's pocket? You know, and if I build this company up, I'm taking greed right off the bat. You know, I'll walk away from the company with nothing. I can care less about that. We have children that are growing, and we're growing older. And if we don't help them out, then who is? No one. It's time we change that. It's time we give back. It's time we just stop and breathe and absorb and act. There's not enough action. I'm going to act though. I'm moving. I'm already in business for myself. Shit. My truck's for sale.
All right, let's give it up for William. So before we start,
actually, questions for William, but in lieu of a question, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
And it's a special thank you to everybody here, to all of our speakers tonight, and to William. Have any of us ever seen The Altruism Revolution? It's a documentary. Ever seen it? You can get it at the library, or you can go online and watch it. But I just saw it's probably one of the best examples of what I believe is one of the most powerful tools for making change. And that documentary you just brought up,